Hello and welcome to the Let That Shift Go podcast. I'm Noel.
And I'm Lena.
And this is where we talk about the good, the bad, and all the shift in between.
We'll just talk mad shift.
Let's get into it. And on this week's episode, we're going to talk about one of life's sneakiest patterns. Hold it up to the light and say, "Oh, you thought you had me?
Not today."
Not today." We're going to talk a little bit about perception versus perspective. But first, let's get into these skin deep cards.
All right, you go first.
All right, this is from the Friends edition. My question is, what's the most ridiculous thing you've seen me do?
Ridiculous thing I've seen you do.
There's got to be a lot of them.
Oh my gosh. I think, when you were a kid, I think you guys you and your friends, we had this dirt road and you guys put yourself into like a tire.
Oh, yes.
You know, like a big tractor tire.
Yeah.
And then rolled each other down the hill.
Yeah, we watched an episode of Scooby-Doo. And in that episode, and of course, they didn't say, do not try this at home and, performed by professionals. But we watched Scooby-Doo and they had take an old tractor tire and they got inside of it and then they used broomsticks to steer themselves.
Oh, that's right. I forgot the broomsticks.
So we thought that this was going to work. So we found an old abandoned tire. We cleaned it all out. It had all kinds of nasty stuff in it. We put carpet on the inside so it wasn't too pokey for us. Mm-hmm. And I got into it on the first run and it was spinning unevenly because because it was just me in it.
Yep.
And when me and Chris got in it, two of us got in it, then we went down the hill and we had our friends stand on either side of us trying on this dirt road, trying to steer us down the hill. And we started about halfway up the hill and they let us go and we started rolling down, and it started going faster and faster. And we tried to steer. And let me tell you that the broomsticks did not work.
No.
And the second one of our friends touched the tire, it started to wobble.
Oh, gosh.
And let's just say at the end of it, we ended up in the cactus at the bottom of the canyon.
I'm surprised you're alive. Honestly, you made your own zip line before. It's like, this is how kids die.
Yeah, we did a lot of crazy stuff.
Yeah, that was the most ridiculous thing. One of them.
What's your question?
My question is, what is something you never want me to forget?
Something I never want you to forget. Mm-hmm. How much you make a difference in your family.
Oh.
Yeah. I think there's so much, we have so many things that go on in our family. Mm-hmm. And somehow things are filtered through you and me too, but you get a lot of it. And I hope you never forget how much we appreciate how much you look out for all of us.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I feel like constantly telling myself I could do more. I should be doing this, or why am I not? And then realizing some spaces are for me to step back in, not all under my control, and can only do what you can do. But I really appreciate that.
Yeah. And we also have each other's back. So there's more of us that it doesn't have to be on one sibling or one person.
Yeah. None of us need to take all of it on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for that.
No worries.
All right, well, let's get into this because I like this one.
It's next level self-awareness, I think.
Yeah. It's like this one little distinction that can change your life, your relationships, your healing, and honestly, your sanity. And it was from a podcast we saw with Andrew Bustamante.
Yeah, Everyday Spy.
Everyday Spy. He's really popular on a lot of podcasts. He was an ex-spy. I don't even know that he's ex-spy. Some still speculate that he's still in the CIA. Mm-hmm. But he talks a lot about like things that he learned in the CIA for training.
Behavioral studies.
Studies. Mm-hmm. And this one you brought up, and it was really really interesting because it was about perception versus perspective. And I don't think many of us make that distinction at all when we are perceiving the world, or we are in situations where we start to make stories about what's going on. And it never really occurs to us that there is a difference between perception and perspective. So let's get clear.
Okay, let's get clear. So let's break down perception.
Yeah. Perception, that is the raw data you're taking in through your senses, right? And it's what you're taking in through your nervous system.
Yeah, it's everything you see, hear, feel, taste, smell.
Yeah, it's just the objective data.
Mm-hmm. It's your perception.
Yep. Mm-hmm. But the kicker is perception is filtered.
Filtered how? Through our own viewpoint?
It's through your past experiences. through your trauma, through your beliefs, and that like literal wiring in your nervous system. And you think about like we have this thing called a default mode network in our brains. And I like to think of it as like these deep grooves in our brains that tell us what something means.
Yeah.
So, whether it's people or types of situations, you're already forming a judgment without really thinking about it. It's just so automatic. And so, for example, if you grew up with emotionally unavailable parents, your perception might be that you have to be hyper alert to rejection. And if someone doesn't respond to your text, your perception can say, see, you're being ignored again.
Yeah, they didn't text me back. See, they don't care about me.
Yeah. But is that actually true?
Not always.
No. And that's where perspective comes in. So what do you know perspective to be? What would you say perspective is?
It's actually like the viewpoint, if you're trying to take on the viewpoint of another person or trying to see it from another angle.
Yep. The mental angle you choose to apply to the perception. So it's how you interpret the data. It's not just the data. It's how do you interpret it? So it's your choice to say, okay, they didn't text me back. Maybe they're overwhelmed. Maybe they lost their phone.
So it's taken a second to shift back out into perception, from perception to perspective.
Yeah, because maybe it's not about you at all. You have no idea what's going on, but your mind is already sort of hyper alert, trained to rejection. Let's say in this example. So that's how that can work.
Okay.
It's just what is the story you're making about it with only having minimal information, and instead there is a way for you to be able to kind of switch out of that and be able to maybe step into the shoes of the other person, because perception is very reactive and perspective is proactive.
Yeah. Perception happens to you while perspective is what you do with it.
Yeah, it's what you do with it. So you get the data, and instead of just going to sleep with it, just being like, oh, that's what this means. They're rejecting me. They don't want anything to do with me. As opposed to, what do you do with that data? And when we talk a lot about that observer.
Yeah,
right?
Cultivating the observer.
Right, and that space.
That's awareness, right?
Exactly. It's all about self-awareness. So it's that stimulus response and having, the wherewithal to find the space in between.
So when you find the stimulus, and perspective is your reaction, right?
Yeah.
It's whatever your perspective is going to cause you to react.
Well, your perception
Perspective.
Yeah, your perception is reactive. So your perception gets the data. There's the stimulus.
Got it.
You didn't get a text back, or you didn't get invited, or whatever, fill in the blank, right? That's your perception is based on what the facts are, and then how your body's responding to it.
Got it.
And then perspective is proactive. That's where you're going to maybe take that space. So that's where your power is. Remember, you have stimulus and you have response, right?
The pause is where you got all that power.
The pause is your power. The pause is where you would, apply this knowledge and be able to gain perspective to say, like, what is actually going on here? And that's where it gets pretty deep. It's like, Andrew Bustamante, they're trained to constantly question both. They're taught to ask, is what I'm perceiving real? And from what perspective am I viewing it? So that's the question to ask yourself.
Yeah.
Again, is what I'm perceiving real? And what you're perceiving real, like, what is the story you're telling yourself about what you're perceiving?
Yeah, because if you're only seeing one point of view, especially if it's through a wounded lens, you might be missing the bigger picture.
Oftentimes, right? And that's exactly what happens in our day-to-day lives.
Yeah.
Because we can mistake perception for reality. And when it's actually just a reflection of like how our nervous system is programmed.
The programmed word again.
Yeah. Programming. Like, are you watching, like really volatile news? You're shaping your lens. Like, your lens is shaped by the information you take in, which is one of the things we talked about more recently.
Yep.
Was the 5 things, 5 people you're hanging out with, the shows that you're watching. It's like that mental diet that we talked about before. And if whatever you're taking in through your mental diet is also shaping the lens through which you see reality.
Yeah.
It's shaping your perception. So really being able to stop and kind of realize, like, how much of this is what I'm making up and how much of it is actually based on facts, right? Not just the objective facts, but like, what am I adding to this? Are you adding something to what's going on, which is then your nervous system gets activated. You go into maybe like fight or flight or anger, frustration, depression, even, from being
this is where you have the option to make a choice.
Yes.
So how do we build the skill of shifting to perspective?
Well, it is a skill. And so, like any skill, it's going to take practice. So
lots and lots.
You're going to fall off many times.
So how do we start? Where's the beginning place?
Well, the biggest one is just pausing before reacting. And we talk about that all the time. So that, that same thing, stimulus response. So pause before you react.
When you notice you're triggered, if you've got your little cues.
Take a breath.
Take a breath, yeah.
Take a breath. The moment you feel your heart rate spike or your face get hot, or maybe you're clenching your gut, you're going to start spinning out into a story about what's happening. Stop. Like right there, stop. And just create a space between the perception and the response, right? Perception is that stimulus. Create that space before you respond.
Yeah.
And the question to ask yourself is, what am I perceiving?
Name those facts, right?
Like, I sent a text, they haven't replied. That's it. That's the raw data. That's all you have. But then you want to ask yourself more questions. What story am I adding to this perception? Right? Because maybe your mind jumps to, they don't care about me. I'm being ignored. This always happens. So those are the stories we start to tell. And really notice when you're starting to become a really good storyteller, because it can spin you up, take you out, take down your whole day. And then you get on this whole roller coaster of just negativity.
Yeah. And those are stories you're layering on top of perception.
Yeah. So once you're asking, what are the stories I'm adding? Notice that those are perspectives. And those layered stories are, you're just, like you said, you're just piling them on top. And then next thing would be to get curious.
Yeah, this is when you're starting to shift.
Yeah. Get curious about what are the other possible perspectives. Like maybe they're busy, right?
That's possible.
It is possible. Maybe the phone's dead. Maybe they're in the middle of something. I know for me, like, I'm going to tell you right now, if you're texting me or calling me, I normally don't have my phone on because if I'm with clients or if I'm with my family or whatever, I don't have them on, have it on. And I got really trained that way because of being, working in the hospital or working in flight. I could never have my phone on. Like it just wasn't professional. So, I mean, oftentimes I think there's probably people who text me and they're like, she doesn't care. It's not true.
No,
it's not true.
I've learned that with you. Yeah. Like she's just not available.
Yeah. And you know what? You shouldn't always be available. Right?
Yeah.
Like in general, we shouldn't just always be available. If you have kids, small kids, and you want to know, what's going on. Oh, yeah, of course. There are things that you can put in place where those calls get through or you get a notification or they know to send a text. But you shouldn't always make yourself available. But anyway, that's nothing to do with this. But one of the best questions to ask yourself, and it's a personal favorite from Bustamante's spy playbook. The question is, what am I not seeing here? That's the spy mindset.
What am I not seeing?
That's the curiosity over certainty. And it's a little more playful, rather than rigid. It kind of leaves an open space to like, yeah, there are other things that could be happening. One that will stop you from spinning, or it can. Yeah. Just starting to ask more questions and be like, is this actually what's going on? And this goes back to one of the other tools that we talk about using is, the work by Byron Katie is when you start to tell yourself a story about what's happening is you want to ask yourself, is that true?
Is it absolutely true?
Can I know 100% that that's true? And oftentimes, I'd say most times the answer is no. You don't know the 100% that that's true. And then asking yourself, how do I feel when I think it? Ooh, I feel rejected. I feel sad. Feel anxious. Okay, but you just have to admit that you don't know that that's true. So who would you be without that thought? And you might just be like, well, they'll get back to me when they can.
This is where those perceptions kind of lean in from like past experiences, past patterns.
Yes.
Making you feel like they forgot or you're not important. All those little things start to build up in your perception, those layers.
Yep. And that can become your personal reality and your
Mm-hmm.
personality,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And then finally, it's just choosing the most empowering, compassionate perspective.
Mm.
And that's often hard. And it's not about gaslighting yourself into like some sort of toxic positivity, but
Mm-hmm.
you can pick a perspective that soothes your nervous system, and it like widens your lens.
Mm-hmm.
Just asking yourself a few questions, taking a breath, taking a minute, and knowing like you absolutely don't know everything about a situation.
I find myself overthinking things too many times.
No.
Really, it just, that perception just gets me in trouble. So,
yeah. What was one of the other things that Andrew was saying that you brought up about this? Like when you're going into that spin, there was something else that you were talking about that I thought was really important.
I'm not sure.
I know I can't remember what it was.
We'll think of it.
We'll think of it. I mean, there's a lot of real life examples. I know. Did you have any real life examples of where you went into like a spin?
You mean I've invited, friends to go out, and then would be, texting, hey, let's, we meet up, and we're trying to set a time, but then it just goes ghosted, like stops responding. And I'm like just waiting for that response. And first it's like, God, did I say something wrong? Did I piss them off, or did I, whatever? I just start spinning off in my head, like, how come they're not responding? And I go into these, I stop drinking. So maybe they don't want to, hang out with me because I'm not drinking anymore. And, they're trying to make an excuse. All of these things, I have all of these insecurities. But then when it came down to it and I actually got to hang out or found out what the truth was, it was like, yeah, they were just busy.
Yeah.
And actually when we did hang out, then it was none of that. It was just my perception.
But you spent a fair amount of time kind of ruminating.
Man. I was ruminating. I had a lot, a lot of insecurities about hanging out with my friends in a different capacity. And I had a lot of judgments that how they're going to be, what they're going to say, what they're thinking, and none of it was true.
Yeah, and that can start to affect even the people that you are around, because now you have this lens of like, I'm not well liked or whatever it is, and so you can even start to give off that energy of like pulling back and isolating, and it had nothing to do with anything that was actually based in truth.
Yeah,
you see them and they're like, "What are you talking about?"
Yeah, that's the thing. They're like, "Are you crazy?" You thought way too much into that. And I was like, yeah, I probably did.
Yep. And then you took we talk about your energy is like a wad of cash in the morning, and you peel off how much of it for each event. It's like, well, I spent at least 50 on that.
Man, I'm in a deficit by the end of the day.
Yeah, you do end up in a deficit at the end of the day. I remember what that you said is that one of the other suggestions that Andrew had was stepping into the view of the other person, like really trying to see the situation from their view. It's not just about phone calls or getting invited, but even when you're having a conversation with somebody or you're interacting with someone, is instead just step out of yourself and try to see the situation from their eyes.
Yeah, I do this.
See what they're seeing.
Sometimes I do this in therapy because I've had a conversation that didn't go the way that I planned.
Yeah.
Or I'm trying to have a conversation. And so in therapy, I'll do some role play where I'm the other person.
Yeah, I love role play. Yeah.
And it really does shift.
I love role play.
It does shift how I feel. And it really cues me into how it feels to hear those words come from the other person. And so it really does shift me and really try to see it from the other person's viewpoint, because then it takes a lot of that fuel away from my anxiety and my whatever resentment or whatever I had, if I just focus on what's actually happening.
Yeah, I like that. It's like taking yourself out of the main character of the movie you're watching.
Yeah, it's like pausing and then go, oh, let me sit over here. Let me just sit on this side of the
I wonder
table.
what it looked like from their view.
I mean, it seems so simple, but I mean, role playing with another person to practice a conversation is so beneficial. I mean, I've done it hundreds of times probably. And it's I've done it either with writing first. I'll do, maybe if I need to talk to somebody, if I didn't have so my therapist wasn't available or somebody wasn't available, I would just do the writing and do a rough draft. And I was like, that's too much, and go back and write and go back through just to get perspective and see where it's at. And then hearing it, then I tried to, okay, now I'm going to read it as if I was the other person.
Oh, yeah.
And see how that feels, how it comes across.
You know, when we were at Fit for Service, we did this really powerful exercise. And it reminds me of this role playing, because what they had you do without telling you how you were going to finish this exercise was think about a conversation that you know you need to have that you've been avoiding.
Okay.
Right? Think of a conversation you know you need to have, but you've been avoiding because there's something really uncomfortable about it. You're afraid, whatever. And so they had you kind of bring that up and journal about it. Then they had you go pick a partner and you had to have a conversation with this partner.
Some stranger, right?
Well, they're fit for service. So they're,
people. Okay.
They're,
in a
there
community,
for healing. Yeah. And like look at them and have the conversation with them and say the things. And man, it brought up all the things, in my nervous system. And then their job was just to listen and tell you what they felt. And then you were able to hear it back. And I'll tell you, that was one of the most powerful exercises I'd ever done. And then, when I got home, it was easier to go and have that difficult conversation.
Really?
Because I had already all right, I know how this may be received or how the person who was just, role playing for me reflected back on what they saw in me and all of that. And it gave me information.
Gave you
and
perspective,
it,
right?
It broadened it. Yeah. It broadened my perception and it changed my perspective. It changed what I thought were the facts.
Yeah.
And made it a very powerful exercise. So I think role playing, like if you're, think about those difficult conversations or, because sometimes it's your perspective of how you think it's going to go that is limiting you from maybe healing that relationship or expanding that relationship or being able to bring closure to something. So why does this matter?
Oh, well, it matters for many reasons.
It's emotional freedom.
Oh, yeah.
Because when you're trapped in reactive perception, you're living in survival.
Oh, man. Survival mode to the fullest. Yeah.
When you consciously choose perspective, and I mean consciously choose it, it's not something that, it's like driving, right? At first you're like checking your mirrors. Okay, how do I do this? How do I do this? What were the steps again? And pretty soon it can become more natural, but it takes practice. Like we said, it's a skill and it takes practice. But when you consciously choose perspective, you open up options. You can regulate your nervous system. You reclaim your peace. That's the biggest one.
Yeah, we need a little more peace in our life.
Yeah. And this is the way that you can reclaim that for yourself. And even the smallest way, right? So that's the task, is really creating that space between the stimulus, between the objective information of perspective, stepping into the observer and be able to widen your perception and maybe change outcomes, at least change yourself internally.
Yeah.
So what do you think about doing a little
let's do a little
breathwork session?
Let's do a little breathwork session.
Okay.
All right. Let's close your eyes down.
Find a comfortable spot. Hopefully not driving, y'all. If this is something that you're doing while you're driving, just maybe mark this part of the podcast and come back to it.
Yeah.
But yeah, just go ahead and find yourself in a seated, comfortable position. Feel that ground beneath you.
Relaxing your body.
Close your eyes down.
And we're going to take 30 breaths in and out of the mouth. Open mouth, big, deep breaths, full in through the mouth, into the belly, into the chest, and up into the head. And we're going to repeat this 30 breaths real deep. And we're going to begin now. As you breathe, bring your mind to a situation that's been sticky lately. Somewhere you've been caught into a stressful story. As you inhale, gather all the raw data of that situation, just the facts. Deep, full breaths. Almost there. Filling the belly, the chest, the head. Relaxing the breath out. And at the bottom of this last breath, take a deep breath and hold. Hold. And while you're holding, I want you to observe, no judgment. And in a few moments, I want you to exhale, releasing the story you've been carrying. Okay. Now we're going to move into our restorative breaths in and out of the nose. Deep, full breaths in through the nose and out through the mouth. And we're going to begin now. While you're inhaling, I want you to invite curiosity. Full deep breaths in through the nose and out through the mouth. Notice how curiosity feels in your body. We're almost there. One last round. Deep, full breaths. In through the nose, out through the mouth, relaxing. With every exhale, releasing control. And now I want you to take one last deep breath in through the nose and release. Holding at the bottom. Hold. Hold. Allow space for new perspectives to arise. Relaxing and grounding. Bringing in that curiosity. Okay, thanks for listening. All right, that's been another episode of Let That Shift Go podcast. I'm Noel.
And I'm Lena. Let us know what your questions are, and we'd love to use them on a future episode. Or check us out on Insta at Let That Shift Go, or visit our website, serenitycovetemecula.com.